Thank you.
Thank you so much for restricting the time. For the restricting time. We have a question for you. Are you resident? Are you resident, or are you in risk? We will have a couple of answers for this with Mr. Clive Stainton, please.
Is that better? Oh, it is. Oh, fantastic. So this is where I do an Elvis Presley impression for you, but perhaps not. Perhaps we'll have to leave that till this evening. My name is Dr. Clive Stainton. I am the Chief Technical Officer of one of the UK's leading cybersecurity firms, CyberQ Group. And I just had a really interesting chat with Serene over there, who asked us to come over and do this, because apparently she's a huge football fan. And so are we, and we have a box at Aston Villa. So here's an open invitation for anybody. If you find yourselves in the UK, look us up and come and enjoy a game of football. But I'm not going to do the Elvis Presley impression, I'm afraid, and I'm not going to talk about football, but I'm going to talk about something a little more serious, which is cybersecurity. So my PhD 30 years ago was in artificial intelligence, and it's been very interesting to see how that is now taken up. Previous speaker was just talking about that. And two words that are really important in financial services worldwide at the moment are risk and resilience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how cybersecurity, information security, risk and resilience are all fitted together. And I also want to say that it's great to be back here in Riyadh. We've done quite a lot of work for Saab in the past and also for HSBC, and currently starting some work with Barclaycard back in London. And I want to tell you a little bit about that too, because it involves the supply chain. And you may think to yourselves, well, my bank or my organization isn't at risk. It is resilient because of what we've done. But the problem is your supply chain, if that has risks in it, if that isn't resilient, then unfortunately that will open up vulnerabilities for you too. So without further ado, let's move on. If this works, give it a try. Nope. I'm not doing very well with the technology, am I? Ah, fantastic. Which, yeah, cool. It's the, in the middle. Ah, fantastic. Thanks very much. So, we know, don't we, from risk management that the measurement and calibration of data is really important. Because if you can't measure something, then how can you present it? And how can you know what you've got? And how can you do something about it? So in the world of cybersecurity, understanding it is actually about measuring it. It's about the data we have around it. Now, if you're in the world of information security, what I've just said makes an awful lot of sense to you already. Because in information technology, we have to be able to measure and calibrate, and that includes the risks, of course. And then, in fact, what you find is that if we don't get any of that right, or if we only get it partially right, then what we're doing, unfortunately, is creating operational risk for ourselves. So you see how these things begin to come together. And then lastly, if we create operational risk, then we don't have strategic resilience. So do you see here how what I've done is I've linked cybersecurity at one end to strategic resilience at the other end. And in fact, it doesn't really matter where you start. If as an organization you want to be resilient, you have to work all the way back to cybersecurity in today's world. Similarly, If you want to have good cybersecurity, the great thing is that will make you resilient, or at least help you become as such. So, securing your supply chain, this is of particular importance to a company like Barclaycard, or indeed, to be honest, to any credit card supplier. Because what you want to be sure is that the merchants who use your services are themselves having very good cybersecurity. Because if they don't, then they inject into your supply chain all kinds of problems and vulnerabilities. So the net isn't just around your organization, it extends further out. And here's one of our clients, Steve Mills, who is the IT director of the large logistics firm in Europe, DPD. And he says, understanding information that suppliers hold about your organization is crucial to mitigating risk and to protect vital data and information. He also says, you are only as strong as your weakest link. A security breach to one part of your supply chain will impact it in its entirety, including your own organization. Wise words. So who are these guys? You wouldn't want to meet them, would you? These are guys who are out to do things to you. These are threat actors. But why would we characterize them? Why do we need to know who they are? Well, in theory, because we want to know how we can improve our threat models, how we can make sure that we stop them from doing bad things to us. But in practice, clearly, if we know who they are, then we can be much better at forensic levels in making sure that we do something about them. So who are they? Well, the first set, and there are 4 sets, the first set, if it's going to work, that's strange. That comes up saying hacktivists, but not this time. Why is that not working? Ah, there it goes. Oh, I see. Okay. So, the first set are hacktivists. These are people who are activists and who are hackers. And often they will think that they're good for your organization. They'll hack you, they'll tell you that what they've done is good for you because it taught you something. But then probably they get greedy and they start asking you for lots of money. And if you don't give them lots of money, they'll carry on. So they start as if they're good, but they're clearly not good. They are a threat to your organization. The second set are cyber criminals. There are some countries in the world, unfortunately, who are positively getting their people to get involved in this. And I'm not going to mention any names, but you know for yourselves in this audience that there are organized cyber criminals out there and that we need to be very careful of who they are and what they do. There's also, unfortunately, the insider threat, the person within your organization who doesn't feel good about something or other and who wants to do something to you to get their own back. And we have a lot of that. And then lastly, there are unfortunately nation states who in themselves want to attack as many organizations as they possibly can. And we won't dwell on that one, but there are the 4 types of threat actor, and each of them have a different way, a different modus operandi. And we need to understand them, and we need to know which one of those are attacking our organization so that we can put in place the defenses necessary. 146 days is the average time before an organization figures out it has been internally compromised. That was part of some research done nearly 3 years ago. So in other words, you are a number of months away from knowing that you've been hacked and that something bad has happened. There are various examples of this. British Airways, unfortunately, was hacked this year, and we know for a fact that the problem was put into their systems 4 years ago. So they didn't know for 4 years, they only found out as it began to cause them an issue. And then, it stopped doing its thing again. Why is that? Well, I'll go on to tell you what the next slide says. That's strange, isn't it? Why is that not working still? Anyway, the next slide says that, oh, there we go. that the average number of days before a law firm knows about being compromised is 225. And that's recent research. So look at that. We've gone from 146 days average to 225 if you're a law firm. That's average number of days. That is well over half a year. Now, what are the sorts of things, and I've taken this slide straight off the internet a couple of weeks ago. What are the sorts of things that law firms are finding? Well, they're finding, of course, that there's a lot of phishing. They're finding that the cost of a spear phishing incident, for example, very expensive, $1.6 million. That 84% of law firms actually learn of their breach through third parties. 97% of law firms have been compromised. These are dreadful figures, aren't they? This is the sort of thing, isn't it, where emails are being sent to clients saying, oh, we've got a new bank account, so why don't you pay your money into this new bank account instead? And unfortunately, some people fall for it. Can you move that on to the next one for me, please? Wonderful. So in IT, unfortunately, we don't help ourselves, because what we tend to do is we create very complex systems. And I'm not going to go through this in any detail with you, but I think you yourselves will understand that this is the sort of landscape that we tend to have. So we've got cryptic logs, in other words, logs that nobody's really going to look at. We have systems that are slow and cumbersome. We often require cyber specialists just to understand what is going on. You get the picture. We haven't helped ourselves in terms of IT. We should be putting together landscapes and estates that are much more simply put together. And if we can, then cybersecurity becomes easier. But it's much more difficult when it's like this. And I don't really know what to do about that, other than to spread the message that simplifying systems actually makes it a lot easier for us. This, unfortunately, makes it a lot easier for the hacker and for the threat actor, because there are various things perhaps that they begin to know about that we don't. Oh, can you take that back to the previous one for me? Thank you. So some people still don't know the difference between the deep web and the dark web. So let's just go through this so that we do understand it. The surface web, of course, is the area that most of us know. That's where Google and Yahoo and all the rest of them, that's where our Internet Explorer is working. But that is only 4% of the content of the web. Within the deep web are all the things that you've perhaps put into the cloud, all the things that are secure, hopefully, to you as an organization. Many of your backups and your databases and your records are going to be in there. But then, unfortunately, there is a large part of the web which sits down the bottom there. And it has its own browser called Tor. And I don't know if anybody has actually ever tried to get into the dark web. It's not difficult to do. If you Google access to the dark web, you'll get Tor and you'll be in there within a few minutes. Now, everything that goes on in there is illegal, so it's not a clever place to be, really. And of course, what we find is that everything is for sale. I can give you an example. My American Express card was cloned yesterday, and by the afternoon, somebody was starting to use it for internet purchases. Typical, isn't it, that I was coming here to give this talk? So that happens to me yesterday. And what happened? I guess the card was cloned, and the information was then sold on the dark web, probably, to some people who then decided they would start to use it. It's unlikely these days that the people who cloned it are the people who actually used the data. That transaction will have occurred through the dark web. So, for example, in a breach of an airline or of a credit search company or of a ticket company, all these sorts of things that have occurred over the years, the information ends up after possibly years on the dark web, and that is where money is changing hands. I don't know whether you know that the dark web actually works like eBay as well. So the people who purchase from it give a star rating for how good the service was. And you can purchase anything there, truly anything. So let's actually have a look. Can you move it to the next slide for me, please? And some of this you won't be able to see because it's too small, but these are examples of all the sorts of things that exist in the darknet. An advert down here on the right is an experienced hacker offering his services. He'll say that he'll do whatever you want him to for the kind of money that you would pay to him. But everything is there. You can see for yourselves. So the dark web is a nasty place to be. And that takes us on then to what we call the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you're old like me, you'll remember the film. But there was a song to sing and there was a hat to wear, and I'm not going to do either of those things either. But some of these organizations are good, and some of them are bad, and some of them, unfortunately, are ugly. The good ones, everybody gets hacked. I mean, everybody. Unfortunately, every organization has vulnerabilities. But the good ones are those that have tried their best to do something about it. The bad are those that have tried but not hard enough, and they end up with all kinds of problems. The ugly are those that know it happened to them and try and cover it up. So what they've done is they've made it even worse. Now, I'm not here to point fingers, and so I'm not going to go through this list and tell you which is which, but you might know for yourselves which is which. So how do you want your organization to be? So going back to where I started, are you at risk? Well, you will be if you haven't taken all of this seriously. And what does that mean in practice? Well, it means having people who are trained and aware. It means having processes that are fine-tuned to understanding all this. And it means having the technology in place, much of which, of course, you can go and talk to people and see what's going on here today and tomorrow. But it also means, though, that you figure this in to everything that you do. And so we talk about something called security built in. And my view is that you're going to be one of the good organizations on this list if you have security built in, you've taken it all very seriously, and you've made sure that your people are aware, that your processes, policies, procedures are in place to counteract cyber issues as much as you possibly can, and that the technology that you have in place is the best and the latest. Even so, you can't be sure you won't be breached. You might be, but this is the best way. The ugly organizations are those that don't have security built in. They don't understand what this means. Actually, it's worse than that. They don't really care. So when a breach occurs, and when customer data gets lost, and when nasty things occur all the way down the supply chain with their suppliers and with their customers, etc., they really are not too concerned. How long will they be in business for? In today's world, not very long at all. So just to finish then, 10 years ago, these concerns around cybersecurity would not really have been in place. Those of us who were in business then, and that I certainly count myself in that, cybersecurity was not really a phrase that was used 10 years ago. Today, it's on everybody's lips because of the cost of it and because particularly the reputational risk that can occur. Okay, so I hope I've done a quick whistle-stop tour through a basic understanding of this subject area. And I leave you with the question, I guess, thinking about what I've just said. Are you at risk? Are you resilient? Leave that with you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much.